Welcome everyone to Blitz 21. I'm your host, Brendan Hall, here with Brad Dal Bon, the linebackers coach at Homer High School in Homer, Alaska. Except, Brad, you're actually in Northern California, which is quite an amazing story here. We're going to get into that more so. Brad, tell me about what life has been like for your last 6 to 8 months as this incredible journey of yours has gotten a lot of publicity.
Well, it started right after the pandemic, with an idea when it started last March. And then it kind of took off in the summer. Again, nobody really paid attention to it because it wasn't really kind of a moment where we were looking for attention. And then, as we started to have a season there up in Homer, I had sent out a tweet basically telling the world what I was doing. But again, just whoever follows me, I mean, I don't have a ton of followers on my personal Twitter account. And then that one tweet with the picture and a little 30-second video of what I was doing, again, just to kind of tweet it out, it generally turned into, people catching wind of it, and it kind of caught fire and started getting a lot of DMs about what I was doing, and Sports Illustrated jumped into it. And then, then it became a thing, especially after that story came out, I believe in October. So yeah, I mean, then things like this, the Blitz and other podcasts and stuff that I've done, my little 15 minutes of fame, I guess, in my life. So it's been kind of fun.
More like 6 months, 8 months of fame, however you want to dial it up. It's pretty impressive. I want to go back first. I think so much of what we've seen over the last year really has been creativity in spite of the odds, especially when it comes to technology. I love to learn first about your experience with technology outside of football, and how it plays into here.
So I, a long time ago, I'd say 20 years ago, I kind of self-taught myself video editing. Before Hudl, there was systems like LRS and, DSV and those kind of companies with football products. And we were all into those. And that, I guess, made me an expert on my campus where I teach currently. And I started teaching video classes and self-taught myself Photoshop and kind of just felt like I was outsourcing a lot of material to people that could do these things. And then I ended up saying, forget this, I'm going to do it myself. And so I've always been, I guess, the people, say around me, they come to me for, video advice, and dove into products, like I said, like DSV and Hudl. And, really kind of ran those for our football program, kind of set up the cameras, did all the game day stuff with video, and broke the film down, did all that stuff post game, sent it out to the coaches, sent it out to the kids, did a lot of the recruiting for our program. I'm also a little bit proficient in making websites. And so I have kind of a technological background. And so the idea of coaching virtually, to me, wasn't like a huge deal. It was like, why isn't anybody else doing this? It seems pretty easy to do, or an idea. But again, as we'll get into, doing the virtual thing wasn't the actual idea. It was actually getting up to Alaska to be teaching or coaching in purpose, in person, while I was teaching my classes distance learning from Alaska back to California. So kind of reverse thing. So that's where the idea kind of started. And again, like I said, it seemed easy to me because of the technology that exists today. So,
well, let's talk about that journey. You're planning on heading up to the last frontier, and then world kind of turns upside down. There's a lot to unpack with a journey. Let's start at the beginning and how this idea first came about.
So March 13th was kind of the day, that everything stopped for a lot of people. That was a Friday. And within a week or two, through meetings, that I was on the Zoom or just talking to people on the campus where I'm at in California, an administrator had mentioned that there's a good chance of the fall being a distance learning situation. And I kind of lost my mind. I'm like, how do you determine that we're already going to be distance learning in the fall when it's March? And I was upset. I sent emails to people. I'm like, how, that we're scaring the public, blah, 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 all those kind of different things. But then after that, I went, okay. So Coach John Jessen from Bartlett High School, longtime football coach at Bartlett, and teacher at Bartlett High School up in Anchorage, had told me that he was going to be helping at Homer. He wasn't coaching at Bartlett anymore. And I had asked him, how are you, what are you doing? How are you going to coach at Homer when you're teaching in Anchorage, which is like 4 hours away? He said, well, I'm going to kind of consult them and do this and that with them. And then, on Fridays, I'm going to go down to the games. I have some family that lives there. I could stay the night and kind of come back on the weekend. Oh, so it's kind of like, that sounds cool. And, John and I had met numerous years ago, and I had been up to Alaska for some football camps, but it just got me thinking, like, maybe I could coach with you. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm hearing that we're distance learning potentially. Why don't I find a way to get up there to Alaska and coach with you guys, and then just teach my classes from Alaska, back down to California, kind of a reverse of the situation. And I had already gotten the approval from my wife. I didn't know how I was going to do it, where I was going to stay, but she's like, yeah, no problem. 6-8 weeks. Their season starts mid-August because it gets so cold. See how long I could do it. Now, these are all logistical things that, we didn't really plan out. It was more of like, let's just do this. And then, but again, I only had talked to John. I hadn't talked to Coach Zank at Homer yet. So it was like, it was just John and my idea. And then all of a sudden, we had to get Coach Zank on board and see if he wanted to even do this. Like, he didn't know who I was. He didn't know what I could do as a coach and if I was any good or, what the heck's going on. So after John took the idea back to Coach Zank, I'd say within 2-3 weeks, we kind of started the conversation about coaching and can we do it and how to do it and do you even want to do it and those kind of things. And that kind of started that process. So I can keep going with that if you want to.
Yeah, keep going. I'll keep the reins loose.
Yeah. So basically, Coach Zank, called. We were on the phone for an hour. I basically kind of gave him my resume and told him how long I'd coached, what I do, what I'd like to do, if I could. And then also talked about if I couldn't come up there, what that would look like. And I had this vision of using iPads or an iPad to be walked around by a manager who would be on Zoom. I'd be on the other end, plug in a speaker into the iPad so I could actually coach. And that idea being a little bit far-fetched, but I thought it'd be easy to do. It was more about the logistical pieces of how to do it. Do you have a manager that can do it? Can I actually coach a position or coach kids, not just watch practice? I told them, I said, if we could pull this off, we have to do all that. And I have to be able to coach on game day. How does that look? How can we do, all those things? And basically the first piece of it was, to get the equipment, and a coach on Homer's staff was able to get some iPads donated for the program. And that kind of really, once those came around, it kind of came like, okay, now that we have these pieces fall into place, we've got to attempt to practice this before we, before we actually go through it. I didn't want the first practice to be the first time we had, done testing of the equipment. So, but again, that was all through the summer, and with COVID locking down kind of the whole nation, including up there in Alaska, that really kind of hindered my whole trip plans, and that really accelerated the virtual piece. Let's get that ready, because I don't know if I can come up there. Plus our teachers, the teachers union and the school district were still deciding if teachers should be on campus, even though there was no kids during this distance learning piece. And so I was a little bit unsure if I can go. So again, that was another level of the virtual experience, getting that going. And so that kind of led us to the end of the summer, which started, Alaska football got the go ahead to start practicing, which, was interesting, because there was no off season, no spring ball, no summer workouts. It was like when they got the okay to work out, it was 2 weeks of practice and you had a game. So installing the offense and doing all these things you couldn't do. And then you add in me, who's not really there, but I am there. And who's this new coach that's not really, human, so to speak, in our face. That kind of added a different element to everything. So it's kind of a strange, it still is, but at that time it was really strange with, how everything was going, and every day seemed to change what the kids can do. If a practice was canceled, or can we do it, is all touch and go, walking on eggshells kind of stuff. So that led us to the season.
I'm curious if I could ask, it always fascinates me how creative we can truly get when we change the context of something. And this is certainly the case here. I'm curious, I'd like to learn why you were so insistent on this kind of as close to the in-person coaching experience as possible. What's missing, with a more, just kind of a remote analysis workflow, as opposed to what you're doing?
Well, I felt like, I really wanted to attempt to do this. I really felt like it could be done. Obviously the personal relationship with the kids and the coaches and the community and all that stuff that goes along with it was missing. But I also looked at, I wanted to help a friend out with Coach Jessen in up in Alaska, and really probably a lot of places. It's hard to get coaches in small towns, and Homer's not a very big town. Their school doesn't have a ton of kids to begin with, let alone how many kids. There was a good number that came out and played football, which was awesome. But I think the time crunch that we had, it was kind of like, you can't think too much, because we had 2 weeks, then we had a game, and I didn't work my way into building relationships with the kids right at the bat. I jumped in, let's go. I didn't talk of this being a hindrance of me not being there. It was like, I know what I'm doing. Here's what we need to do to beat these guys, to get ready for the game. Let's get going. The kids kind of rolled into, bought in, through the wonky internet sometimes and whatnot. And I think after the first game, when we kicked the dog out of the team that we played, I think they kind of realized that, I'm not taking credit for the whole thing, but we really crushed the other team and didn't allow, I think they only got 6 points that game, and kind of, took off from there. Kids really started kind of buying into more of what we were doing. But again, the relationship part was still, I don't think, as strong being in person versus this virtual stuff. got better as the season went on, and we were in meetings and doing this different stuff. And then right towards the end of the season, I had actually booked a flight to Homer for the playoffs. It was that was a book in of itself with COVID rules and booking the flight and quarantines and games being moved from one week to the next. And my school that I teach at was going back to hybrid. But again, going back to your question, it was like I was doing that to try and get up there to coach these kids. Like I wanted that live experience. And it didn't end up happening because COVID kind of shut down the entire state again, and sports got canceled, even though they were 2 weeks away from finishing. But that hopefully won't stop me. I'm looking to get up there this summer, potentially to do some install, like some summer football stuff, if not somehow pull off getting up there during the season next year, if that's possible too. Again, just to kind of show these kids my face and show them, get them pumped to play football and, be even more of a part of it than I was this past season. So
yeah. You mentioned about some of the cranks you're working out early in this process. Take me through the logistics of getting you dialed on game days, getting you around the sideline, etc. I want to learn more about that.
So basically, the time difference from California to Alaska is 1 hour. California's behind or ahead. I don't know, whatever. Either way,
either an hour ahead, right?
Yes.
It's all a whirlpool at this point.
So yeah, that's right, hour ahead. So at 4 o'clock their time, Alaska time, was 5 o'clock California time, and so I would have some time after my day to get ready for a practice, and we would I get a link either through my phone or on my computer, and I jump into my chair here and pop in, and usually it was one of the team managers on the other end, and depending on the weather, depending on the internet connection, depending on where my location was, and I usually was on the field. And we attempted a tripod, but it ended up being a little bit better if they just held the iPad. And then basically the way Coach Zank ran practice, he had blocks of time like most coaches do. And wherever that block of time, I had the schedule on my computer, so I knew the time breakdown. And I would say, okay, we're going here, we're going here, we're going here. And then the manager would I need you to take me down to the end zone or over here. And, they would be holding the iPad and they'd have to plug in a speaker because the Bluetooth in Zoom, I don't think worked very well. So they had a speaker and the iPad holding both. I think they held the speaker across their forearms as they were holding up the iPad. I know it's kind of difficult for them, and then I would just get them into position and I would constantly be talking to them, moving them. I'd also, if there was an audio issue, I would tell the girls to coach for me. I would say, tell them this, and just give them trigger words to and the kids would respond. So I had to be real creative I couldn't be wordy. I couldn't talk too much. I'd have to kind of get to the point, and that helped me as a coach. And then during team sessions, the girls would have to line up. I'd tell them to get right behind the linebackers at about 8 yards, since the linebackers were at 5 yards off the line of scrimmage, and they would be right in the pit. They'd be right in the fire when the team was running like live plays, and they're standing there in that cauldron of bodies flying all over the place. And, I would tell them to kind of focus on one side or the other, and they just did a great job. Like I said, some days it was pouring rain, internet a little bit intermittent, just all, Alaska weather, right? And they'd stand out in it, and we never missed a day unless they didn't have practice for some reason, study hall or something got changed with the schedule. I was there every day. They were there every day. And I'd only do the defense. So Coach Zank was very disciplined with his schedule, and we'd start at 5, end at 6, and I'd be done. I'd do my normal stuff, watching film and stuff outside of practice time, but then I get ready for the next day, depending on what we were doing. And we get going. I thought one of the best things we did, it was kind of a total hit and miss, trial and error, crazy thing, is they would put me in practice up in the press box with a tripod, like a coach would watch in a game. And then they stuck the public address, the PA microphone, to the speaker of the iPad, so I could talk to the team down the field during like a team session. So now I'm able to see like the all 22 shot, and I'm talking to the team, and I'd be like, hey guys, can you hear me? And they'd all turn to the press box and give me like a thumbs up. And I'm like, this is crazy. I'm in California. I'm on the PA system at a high school in Alaska, and all these kids are hearing me. And I would get my stopwatch, which I don't have right around me here. And we would do like pursuit drills, and I would time them. I'd be like, you got 5 seconds to get to the ball once the ball's been snapped, or once the running back would get the ball, you have 5 seconds to get there. And you would just see these bodies fly into the ball and reacting to what I was saying. And I'm like, this just was like so surreal that I'm coaching these kids from thousands of miles away in a pandemic, all those crazy things. But I thought of that stuff, and we just got these kids better through that mechanism. And then game day, that was probably the most exciting thing we did practice wise. And on game days, the first game, the iPad speaker, or the headphone jack, was in one of the coach's ears, and then he also had a headset on down to the field. So he was listening to me if I was giving it, advice or whatever, a coaching decision or something like that. And he would spit it down to the coaches. And I like that the best, but we only did it the one game, because I don't think it was, it's hard for the coach to be listening to me as he's getting 4 coaches yelling in his ear through his regular headset. Then it turned out to be where that coach went down on the field, there was still a coach in the press box. So I'm on an iPad, kind of like when you film a game, but it was just me watching. And then I was on my phone. So I'd have my phone up to he'd have his regular headphones for his phone, and I would be watching, and again, would give kind of advice, or, hey, coach up this kid and tell this kid to do that, and, regular coaching stuff. And that worked well. I just didn't like holding my phone the whole time. But again, I would be able to watch the game if the internet was pretty good. Sometimes it was choppy. Sometimes where they positioned me, I'd have like a huge pole right in my way. And this worked. Away games, it was always tricky because you didn't know if the internet was very good at these stadiums that we played in, but we didn't have any issues. And so I give those kids and the managers and coaches like a lot of credit, because I know that, that was part of the discussion Coach Zank and I had in the summer, was like, we're all in on this. I need you to be set up at the games. I don't want to be missing, anything. And that took effort for them to be me on the other end. And we never, like I said, we never missed anything. I never felt like it was, one day, come on, why aren't we here? What do we, they just did a great job being me on the other end. And I really appreciate them, 1, for having me, and then 2, doing that stuff to make it work, because it was a lot.
I'm curious. You've hinted at this in several different ways, but about some of the barriers language wise. You mentioned about being careful not to be too wordy to comply with some of the potential technical issues. This press box thing, speaking through the speakerphone, that presents its own challenges, right? Because it's not like they can just yell back at you, right? So I'm curious. The the challenges this stuff presented from a language standpoint, and how you adjusted, and the lessons you learned along the way?
Well, early on too, the speaker was an issue because sometimes the girls would forget the cord that plugged the speaker in, and then they were trying to do yeah. Well, and I gave them a lot of crap too, because it would be in their car or they'd forget it, or one of the girls had the cord, but one of the other girls was working that day. They weren't there. I mean, so there's a lot of that. And so what that adjustment had to be was, my voice through the actual iPad wasn't projecting, right? It only would go, a few feet, and these kids are 5-10 yards away, just so they wouldn't be running into the equipment or the people holding it. And so that's where I turned into telling the team managers, hey, you got to talk for me. Tell Johnny he's got to do this, put his hand there, take a step here, go faster, all those coaching cliches that you use, and they'd repeat them. He says to do this, that kind of, it was, comical, but I'm like, I only have 5 minutes, so we can't sit here and cry about not being able to communicate that well. So we got to make it work. And, we did our best on those days. Having the speaker was obviously better, but we made it work. And I repeated a lot of the drills, because, it's just like riding a bike, you fall off a few times and then you end up staying on. That was kind of the mentality with the drills. Like, I didn't want to just do it one time and then do something else. I wanted them to kind of master a skill a little bit. And so them kind of doing the drills over and over, there were times when the girls didn't want to go out of the press box because it was raining and cold, and I'd have to coerce them. Come on, I'm here. Put on your slicker, get down the field in the rain. But they'd have the camera on my position group, and those kids were doing the drills without me. So I was like, yes, this is working, right? They were, you had leadership within the position, and they knew that if I wasn't there, even though I was coming in or the girls were going to walk down the field, to just kind of do this stuff on their own. And then, game days, or, the press box, all that stuff, it was really communication with one person. And so we solved that. Things that that might work in the future, possibly, instead of hanging up the phone at halftime, staying on the line and making adjustments with the coaches, hearing what they have to say, or even staying on the Zoom if that iPad can get down to the team wherever they are. Potentially, if we want to make changes where I could add my 2 cents into a change, that adjustment that needs to be made, that's a possibility of something we could do in the future. But we didn't do that, so I literally would hang up the phone, leave the Zoom on, and then I would see kind of the camera shuffling. I knew they were getting ready for the second half, and then coach would call me on the other end of it, and off we go with the second half. And a lot of times, even after the games, it was like, hey, great job, beep, done. Like, I didn't get to, I would say, hey, tell the guys great job, and that's about it. I didn't really get to kind of celebrate with them, but I also didn't have to take the 14-hour bus rides and stuff that all these guys had to do too. So
Hey, no solutions, only trade-offs, right?
yeah, exactly. I had it way easier, I think. So
Yeah. Well, there's a happy ending to this too, because you guys, this wasn't just like an impressive work. You were winning with it, and you
right.
won a conference title, I believe, at the end of the season. Correct?
Yeah, and so I knew about Alaskan football, but I didn't know a lot. I coached Zank, like I said, with Homer's the school size. I even out how big's the school. He was saying it was like 250 kids, and how many kids come out and play football. I just didn't realize how small the small school was, and didn't know much about wins and losses, didn't know much history. And so we were sitting there, and I believe, I'm looking at the schedule, it was for us, the week 4 of our 5 games that we played, but it really wasn't 5 straight weeks, because there was a week in there that we didn't have a game because of an outbreak or something, COVID situation. Anyway, we played Kenai, which is a a school that's kind of their rival, Homer's rival, but they're also in a higher division. The divisions are just 1, 2, and 3, 1 being the highest, most kids attendance. Then Division 2 is in the middle, and then 3 are the small schools. So we're a small school playing Kenai's Division 2, and we end up beating them 44-6. And I would watch them on film, and I'm like, these guys are going to give us problems. They're good, they're fast, they're strong, and we got some breaks early and just kind of rolled them. And I didn't find out till like midweek, late the next week, that they hadn't Homer hadn't beat Kenai in like 8 years. It'd been some, and I'm just kind of like, I kind of put blinders on. It was like, it didn't matter who we were playing. I don't care what they were, who they are currently. We have this job to do to them. And I don't know if that got, I didn't really convey that to the kids. It was more like, let's go. I'm not scared. You're not scared. Well, let's go get them. And, to beat those guys handily like that, I think gave us a ton of confidence going forward. And then we played a team called Soldatna, who's a Division 2 team, but I think they're ranked number 1 in the state. So they're a really good Division 2 team. And they handed it to us 2 times. But the reason we played them is because in the Kenai Peninsula, where Homer's located, with COVID rules, you could play teams in your area, even though it's kind of far away. They counted it all. So we played the teams in the Kenai Peninsula that were in our league and a couple that weren't in our league. And that gave us our 3-2 record, but we were 3-0 in our conference game. So that gave us the conference title. And then we had a bye for the playoffs. And that bye week was going to be the week that I was going to go up there. But I wanted to coach a game, and I had a small window of my own time. And that game got shifted. Even though we had a bye, it got moved back or forward a week. And it was really that, like I said, touch and go, getting a flight, changing the flight to canceling the flight, all that stuff, because I couldn't end up getting up there. And then we found out, so we had the bye week, and 2 teams played each other to the winner end up playing us in the first round of the playoffs. But the playoffs are only going to be 2 weeks long for the state championship. It's kind of crazy. Normally it's like 3 or 4 weeks. It was like, win the first playoff game and you're in the state championship. And so we felt good. We had a chance for the state championship. And then that Monday of the week of the game we were supposed to have, they canceled the Alaska Association for High School Sports, canceled everything, not just football, all fall sports. And it was kind of a shocker to everybody that we had played this whole season. And then it was literally just gone. Like, I don't even know how hard everybody fought to try and get it back. They had determined. And it was just kind of weird because they had done this so long, had made it through this whole process. Just go 2 more weeks is the way I felt it should go, but they obviously didn't. And so the season ends, and we consider ourselves conference champions because we won the most games in our conference. So, and I think we were the first conference champions in the pandemic era of 2020, because Alaska football starts so early that other fall teams across the country hadn't gotten to their playoffs yet. So
First for a lot of things, I guess.
Yeah, first digital coach, first season that started, first champions. So we'll take it. We'll take it for sure. Yeah.
I want to, I feel free to beg to differ with me on here. I feel like there's been enough net positive as far as remote analysis during the pandemic. We've seen that some of the bones of this, whenever we come out of it, will stick. And I'm curious, from hearing your story, what can coaches looking into remote, analysis, what can they learn? What can they take away?
Well, I think enough people and coaches, really everybody who's, they might not have been a techie kind of person, has kind of been forced into doing this. I think everybody's probably been on some kind of Zoom or Google, situation, Teams or whatever, digital media like this at some point. And so if you could just be on something like this and learn how to take advantage of it with your career, doesn't matter what you're doing, but as a football coach, there's many, I think guys like me and other coaches that are watching this are real creative with how they could turn their situation into positive to make it work. I know coaches obviously would meet their teams on Zoom and have virtual, that kind of stuff. I know people would have even practices, or they'd watch their kids do drills, and there's a lot of things that have happened besides what I've done. And I think that I had mentioned a couple possibilities of doing things a little bit differently. I'm looking at Homer's a Hudl school, so maybe they get the Hudl sideline product, and maybe I could see the game film while I'm here and make adjustments even though I'm watching it, just like I might have an iPad or something on the sideline to review. And so I think we're always looking for something that gain an edge, not only against our opponent, but to give our kids a better opportunity to play better, to do the skill better or whatever. And it doesn't have to just be during the season, during practice. It could be in the off season. So, I'm looking to try and get in the weight room this summer on Zoom and coach up some kids that way. So, I think it's endless if you can make it work both ways. Like I said, it takes work on the other side of this for that to happen. So you have to have kind of a mutual agreement that someone's going to take on the responsibility of being on the other end. So it can be done. Again, it just kind of happened. We made it work, and it was really a lot of the other side of this. And I just did my coaching part on this side. So I really commend, I'm the one in front of the camera, but it's really all the people on the other side of it that need a lot of credit too for making it work.
Awesome. Coming up on a few minutes left here. I just want to give you the floor for anything else you want to add, and certainly how can people keep in touch with you for advice on this stuff?
Well, I've got multiple ways, Twitter accounts you can follow, but my personal account is @ToTheHouse. If you're not following me already, I have a little side business that I run. I do some graphic design at Real Sports Replay. So it's RSR Sites, SITES on Twitter, or realsportsreplay.net. My phone number's there. You can message me through Facebook. It's easy to find me. I've already talked to a few coaches about various things with just coaching. But anybody who wants to find out more of specific details of what it took to do what I did, feel free to connect with me. I didn't expect all this to happen. I kind of remember everything you need to do to be successful and beyond to make it work. I do suggest that, you make sure you could work it out time-wise. California being ahead of Alaska by an hour really helped. I think if you're trying to do it too far, different time zones could be, an issue. But again, make it work. It's a situation where I wanted to coach with my friend, Coach Jessen, and couldn't really ever do it. Never thought I could. So if you have a friend, in another state, or even, in the same state, but a little farther away from that you can't get to, it can be done. And it's fun. And it's coaching. It's just not being there physically, but it was a heck of an experience. I appreciate Homer, and I'm looking forward to continuing to help those guys as long as I can. So, I appreciate Hudl for having me as well, and doing this. So thank you guys.
feeling is mutual, Brad. This is certainly one of the coolest stories to come out of this pandemic, and certainly one of the coolest stories I think we've heard this week. So I want to thank you for coming on and sharing it.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Awesome.